While planning our wedding, I found Nathan's diary from when he was 16. She's so fat and disgusting, and she still has a crush on me. It makes me sick. I got a girlfriend hoping she'd finally give up and stop looking at me like that. The bitter entries stopped on May 13th. That was the day I gave up my weightlifting career to save his life. I hazily remembered his question freshman year of college, "Want to be together?" The look of relief on his face when I said yes. I thought we were in love. But really, he'd spent years wrestling with guilt, finally sacrificing himself to repay a debt. Suddenly it all felt meaningless. I called off the engagement and left the Blackwood family. Months later, one night, he waited in his car outside my apartment. His eyes turned red when he saw the man beside me. "Who is he? Is he your boyfriend?" 1. The summer night carried a hint of chill. Nathan hadn't said a word since stepping into the house. I sat nervously to the side. Mrs. Blackwood squeezed my hand reassuringly. She turned to Nathan, "If you don't want to settle down, just say so now. It's been 7 years. Do you want to get married or not? Sarah's only patient because she loves you. That doesn't make what you're doing right." Her face flushed with anger. How did I raise such a worthless son? I patted her back. "Really, I'm not in a hurry. How can you not be?" She turned to face me. "This boy ruined your life. I won't let him get away without taking responsibility. I just don't understand. What does he want?" The sound of a lighter clicking open and shut filled the silence. Nathan had kept his cold expression throughout. After his mother finished, he let out a harsh laugh and looked up. "Fine, let's get married." He stood up. "Plan it however you want." He stormed upstairs without once looking at me. My heart tightened. I quickly excused myself to his mother and followed him. The bathroom shower was running. Nathan was showering. I sat on the bed, staring blankly at the floor. "Do you not want to get married?" The water was too loud for him to hear me. He turned off the water and opened the door, wearing only a bathrobe around his waist. "What did you say?" His hair was dripping wet. He hadn't even dried himself. Water droplets rolled from his sharp features down to his chest muscles. My face suddenly burned red. I stammered, not knowing what to say. While Nathan changed, I closed my eyes and counted sheep. Only when his large hand rested on my head. "I'm dressed. You can open your eyes." Did I slowly look? He was fully dressed now. He crouched down to my eye level and asked, "What did you want to say? Do you not want to get married?" "No." He looked away, standing up to collect his dirty clothes. "Don't overthink it." But I knew Nathan was lying. He didn't want to get married at all. I wanted to suggest postponing the wedding, or say I wasn't in a hurry. But the words got stuck in my throat, leaving only an ache. I couldn't stay in the room any longer and rushed to leave. "I'll go to bed then." He grabbed my hand, frowning. "You want to sleep separately?" He lifted my face. "Have you been crying?" "No. I'm doing everything you want. What more do you want from me?" Nathan suddenly snapped, his face turning cold. "If you want to make drama, go right ahead." In our 7 years together, he'd rarely spoken to me so harshly. But now, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressure to marry, he showed his raw emotions for the first time. I froze, feeling suddenly like a stripped bare clown. He left without looking at me. Only the faint scent of his shower gel reminded me of what had happened. After that night, neither of us mentioned what happened, nor did we discuss postponing the wedding. He just grew quieter, barely interested even in choosing the wedding dress. He often worked until midnight, taking ages to reply to my messages with a simple, "busy." He even missed his mother's birthday. Everyone awkwardly smoothed it over, but we all knew it was Nathan's way of showing his displeasure with his mother. I ignored the unease in my heart, pretending nothing was wrong, forcing myself to practice my smile. Until a few weeks later, I woke up one morning to find him staring at his phone. "Why aren't you sleeping?" When I tried to sit up, he quickly put his phone away. "Go back to sleep." But in that instant, I still caught a glimpse of the photo on his screen. It was a picture of 17-year-old Nathan with 17-year-old Grace. I turned away, feeling like I'd been plunged into ice water. My mind flashed back to years ago, when his childhood friend had looked at me with contempt. "Even if he's with you now, so what? You'll never measure up to Grace." He'd dragged out the words, "You fat pig." What had I thought back then? I believed that if I just held on long enough, Nathan would eventually fall for me. He would love me someday. But now, the naked truth stared me in the face. My heart felt like it was being stabbed with needles. He had never forgotten Grace. All the strength I'd been faking crumbled in an instant. Suddenly, I didn't want to get married anymore. I wanted to break up with Nathan, too. After making this decision, I agonized over when to say it. Since high school, when I moved in with the Blackwoods, Mrs. Blackwood had always been good to me. I could tell she genuinely loved me, truly treated me like her daughter. That's exactly why I struggled with how to tell them while minimizing the hurt. I postponed the scheduled wedding dress fitting, using work as an excuse. After college, I joined a media company, handling celebrity marketing and PR. Nathan wasn't happy with my job choice, since it often meant working late, sometimes getting up at 2 a.m. for meetings. So when I said I was busy, he didn't question it. He even seemed relieved. Only Mrs. Blackwood suspected something was wrong. She thought I was being mistreated and gave Nathan a fierce scolding. When I got home, she had just finished the phone call, her eyes still red. She grabbed her purse and tried to pull me out with her. "It's okay, Sarah, I'll take you to confront him, make him explain himself." What could be more important than trying on wedding dresses with his fiancée just because someone's back in the country? He's really lost his mind. From Mrs. Blackwood's words, I understood Grace was back. No wonder he'd been so distracted lately, no wonder he seemed relieved when I couldn't make the dress fitting. No wonder, no wonder. When words fail, sometimes all you can do is laugh. Mrs. Blackwood was startled and hugged me. "Sarah, I know you're hurting. Don't worry, I'll make this right." "Mrs. Blackwood," I gently pushed her away, "please let me handle this myself. I'll sort it out." I went upstairs, stood dazed for a moment, then tried to get my phone from my bag. My hands were shaking so badly that everything spilled onto the floor. I crouched down, picked up my phone, and just sat there against the foot of the bed as I called him. The phone rang a few times. When he answered, there was a lot of background noise, making it hard to hear clearly. "What is it? Where are you?" He paused, then let out a cold laugh. "What, checking up on me?" He moved somewhere quieter. "Sarah, is this really necessary? Getting my mom to yell at me wasn't enough, now you're starting to. I said I'd marry you, isn't that enough? Where are you?" I repeated. My fingers dug into my palm, barely keeping it together. "Address," he gave an address, "come if you want." Then after a pause, as if remembering something, added, "Since you're coming, bring me the folder from my study." The call ended with a click, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to keep the tears from falling. I rarely went into Nathan's study, he didn't like it. The study was decorated in typical black and white, cold and clean just like him. I spotted the folder on the desk right away, and was about to take it when my eyes caught sight of a diary sitting nearby. Sometimes you just know when something life-changing is about to happen. Like in school, when you could sense you were about to be called on by the teacher. That's how I felt now. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my eyes were drawn to it like a magnet. When I opened the diary, I couldn't help but hold my breath. August 29, 2015. "There's a new girl living with us now. Mom and Dad say she's an athlete who'll be staying here. She always smells like sweat. It's annoying." I remembered that hot day when I arrived at the Blackwoods with all my bags. My parents were good friends with Mrs. Blackwood. That year, I'd made the state weightlifting team, and they arranged my transfer to make training easier. Nathan was the first person to open the door when I arrived. He wore a clean white t-shirt, his hair neat and fresh. He carried my things inside, then turned to me. "I'm Nathan. What's your name?" "Sarah." He smiled at me and put my things in my room. "We've got your room all set up. If you need anything, just let me know, and I'll have my mom take care of it." Back then, he was so gentle and polite. I stood there awkwardly, looking at him, feeling like a seed of something soft and warm had been planted in my heart. I never imagined this was what he really thought of me. November 5, 2015. "The way she looks at me is weird. Don't tell me she actually likes me. She even brought me a birthday present, some handmade stuffed animal. Chris asked for it, so I gave it to him. Just thinking about it gives me the creeps." January 3, 2016. "I hate how everyone jokes about us." March 7, 2016. "She actually confessed to me. Seriously? Does she think she's the heroine of some romance novel? When is she finally going to move out?" My throat felt like it was coated in glue. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. When I first came to the city, I didn't have many friends. Nobody at school really talked to me, except sometimes the other athletes. I was mostly alone. Nathan looked out for me at school. He remembered when I had my period, stood up for me when people made fun of me, helped bandage me up when I got hurt. Falling for Nathan was the most natural thing in the world. That's why, even though I now knew he didn't love me, even though I planned to leave him, I never regretted loving him back then. As a teenager, I didn't have much money. So despite being terrible at crafts, I learned to make things by hand. That stuffed animal took me weeks to make, taking it apart and redoing it over and over until it was right. When I gave it to him at the party, everyone was watching. I felt awkward and was about to take it back. But Nathan had already accepted it and put it back in the gift box. "Thank you, I love it." I thought he really did like it. So even when his friend Chris mouthed, "fat pig," at me, I didn't say anything. I never cared what others thought of me. My mom always said, save your feelings for the people who are good to you. Nathan liked it. So I was happy. At 17, I had no idea he gave that gift to Chris right after. Chris threw it in the trash as soon as he left. I never understood why Chris was so mean to me, until later I realized it was simply because I wasn't pretty. That's why he targeted me so cruelly. But I didn't know that then. I thought Nathan was different from everyone else. I carried my teenage crush like so many other girls, nothing special about it. Just because I wasn't pretty, I got labeled disgusting and unbearable. When I confessed, I stammered so badly I could barely finish a sentence. He kept smiling gently. Thank you for liking me, but I'm not looking to date right now. What was he really thinking then? I felt sick to my stomach, trying to throw up, but nothing would come. The physical reaction made tears fall. I forced myself to keep reading, gripping the diary. April 9, 2016. I got a girlfriend. Hope she'll finally give up and stop looking at me like that. I couldn't help but laugh. For the first time, I saw how laughable my feelings were, how cheap, how worthless. But he could have just told me. There were so many chances if he'd just said something, I would have backed off. Why did he act so caring while writing such things? The diary's last entry was May 13th. That day, some thugs tried to extort money from Nathan. When he refused, it turned into a fight. I jumped in front of him to protect him. They broke my hand with a pipe. I could never do weightlifting again. After that, Nathan broke up with Grace. Soon after, Grace went abroad to study, and they lost touch completely. 3. In college, I started taking care of my appearance and managing my weight. That's when things really began to change between Nathan and me. Maybe it was because he felt indebted to me, maybe it was just the romantic lighting that night. He suddenly took my hand and asked, "Do you still like me?" I was too nervous to look at him. He held my neck and kissed me. It was my first kiss. It tasted faintly of mint. The first day we were official, Nathan brought me to his mother. We're together now. In that moment, he seemed more relaxed than ever, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Looking back now, I finally understood what I thought was true love was just his misguided way of repaying a debt. When I arrived at the address, Nathan was playing pool with Chris. His face was like ice, completely silent. Chris was stirring up trouble as usual. "Grace is back, why don't you just break up with her? You're not actually attached, are you? Hey, I still remember the first time I saw her, all that fat, bringing you that stuffed animal." "Shut up." Nathan put down his cue stick and was about to say something when the door opened. Everyone in the room froze. Nathan looked panicked for a moment, but seeing my calm expression, he relaxed. I handed him the folder. "Here's what you asked for." "Thanks." He hesitated, about to explain something, when he saw me hold out the diary. "Was it fun?" I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. "Was it fun, Nathan?" My voice cracked. I threw the diary hard at him. He didn't move, panic returning to his eyes. He reached for my shoulders. Chris stepped forward and shoved me. "What's wrong with you?" Slap. I backhanded Chris across the face. "I'm talking to him, stay out of it. All these years, you've never had a kind word for me. Fat pig, ugly girl, aren't you tired of saying these things?" "I'm tired of hearing them." "What, being a weightlifter, gaining weight for my sport, is that something shameful? Who are you to look down on me? Even my parents never criticized my weight or my looks. What right do you have? You're like a leech that won't let go. People might think you're in love with me, the way you obsess over me like a dog with a bone." I was furious, my eyes red. Chris stood there stunned, speechless. Nathan tried to hold me. "Sarah, calm down." "I am calm." I shoved him away, picked up the diary from the floor, and made him look at it. The more he read, the paler he got. He mumbled, "Let me explain. Let's break up." I laughed harshly, glaring at him. Really, it makes me sick just thinking about it. I turned and walked away. Nathan tried to follow, but I stopped him. "Why follow me? Are you planning to marry me?" He stopped in his tracks, motionless. Watched me walk away step by step until I disappeared from his sight. 4. After confronting Nathan, he avoided me at home for several days. Everyone in the house knew something was wrong, but no one dared to ask. I told my mom first. She wasn't surprised. She asked, "Do you want to come home?" "I need to think about it," I said. I haven't told Mrs. Blackwood about the breakup yet. No matter what happened between Nathan and me, Mrs. Blackwood's kindness was real. I didn't want to hurt her. Plus, I couldn't just quit my job on the spot. Starting over takes courage. After hanging up, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. Maybe it was because of my job being surrounded by beautiful people, but I'd become increasingly focused on maintaining my appearance. Gradually, I'd become what others called a pretty girl. Looking at myself in the mirror, I could still see traces of who I used to be. Grip the barbell, bend the knees, squat down. Day after day of practice. Gradually, that person faded away, replaced by this polished woman who clocked in and out of work precisely each day. I'd become prettier, but I wasn't as happy as I'd imagined. I missed wearing workout clothes and going barefaced, rather than being this perpetually wound-tight city girl. Life's choices often come down to a single moment. That evening, I prepared a full dinner spread. I didn't want to be like Nathan, dragging things out. I knew I had to be the one to announce the breakup, or Mrs. Blackwood would never accept it. After we'd eaten well, I spoke up. Nathan and I broke up. Before she could respond, I added, I ended it. Mrs. Blackwood's eyes immediately turned red. I held her hand, resting my head on her shoulder. I know you're worried about me, but you can't force love. And honestly, I don't love him anymore. I'm quitting my job. I submitted my resignation today. Once I finish the handover, I'm going home. Mrs. Blackwood, I smiled at her, you can always come visit me. Mrs. Blackwood couldn't say anything. She just kept crying. She held me tight for a long while before finally choking out, Nathan wronged you. If I had known earlier. I'm so sorry. It took a long time to comfort her before she accepted the reality. Nathan didn't hear about my leaving until 2 weeks later, on my last day of work handover. I had a flight booked home for 10 a.m. the next day. He knocked on my door, his voice hoarse, can we talk? Time really does dull everything. I no longer felt the initial pain, just a deeper numbness. We have nothing to talk about, I gave a slight smile. Don't worry, we're ending things amicably. I won't say anything to upset Mom, and she won't pressure you anymore. That's not what I meant. I opened the door. Nathan met my eyes, looking defeated. He clearly hadn't been sleeping well. He looked noticeably haggard. What time's your flight tomorrow? Let me drive you. If you want. Then I closed the door. The next day, Nathan drove me to the airport. I didn't refuse. It was the last time anyway. If only for Mrs. Blackwood's sake. I didn't want to make things ugly. After we parked, he handed me my luggage. When I grabbed it, he wouldn't let go. After tugging back and forth a few times, I lost patience and gave him a cold look. He lowered his eyes guiltily and gradually released the suitcase. Keep in touch. I let out a harsh laugh and walked away without looking back. The first thing I did before boarding was block Nathan's number. Complete strangers was the best ending for us. 5. Back home, the first thing I did was sleep for 3 days straight. My hometown was nothing like the big city. Everything moved so much slower. After the wedding was cancelled, relatives didn't ask many questions. They just occasionally suggested I get out more. A few weeks later, they started trying to set up blind dates. My mom didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she eventually talked them out of it. Over the years, I'd saved up quite a bit, around $300,000 in total. I put most of it in long-term savings and invested the rest. My high school friend Ming was starting a social media channel. When she heard I was back, she begged me to join her. The concept was street interviews about friendship. Basically, we randomly interview strangers. If they want to make friends, they write down their traits, and we pass it to the next person. If there's a match, we arrange a meeting. I'd been wondering what to do next, so Ming's idea clicked immediately. I transferred $50,000 as startup capital. Ming hugged me, squealing with excitement. We're going to be huge together. I felt both amused and happy. Maybe because a new life was right in front of me. Whether we succeeded or failed, I was excited about seeing the view from this different path. Once we started preparing for the channel, we researched accounts and filming. Our first shoot was at the University District, randomly catching a few pedestrians. But the response was lukewarm, so we switched locations to an elementary school. This time went much smoother. It was always less tense working with young kids. After filming, we were heading to get food. Suddenly Ming grabbed my hand, hot guy. Under the tree-lined street stood a man in a black suit. Athletic build, handsome features. He seemed to have been watching us for a while. He jogged over, his cheeks slightly red. Is this a friendship platform? He held out his phone, looking at me. Can I get to know you? Ding. My phone received 2 messages. An unknown number. It was a photo of Nathan and Grace holding hands. Caption, they're together now. I knew exactly who it was from. The nausea rose again and I replied, pathetic. After sending it, I blocked Chris's number. Ming noticed my mood change and whispered, what's wrong? Nothing, just dealing with an idiot. I looked up at the guy in front of us and quickly added, not you. He didn't mind, just smiled, I know. He held out his phone again. Can I add you on social media? I'm Dean. 7. After getting home, I learned from my mom's hesitant words. Meeting Dean wasn't a coincidence. We were actually middle school classmates. I dug out our graduation photo and had to look several times before I could match the skinny boy in the corner with today's man. I had no memory of him at all. My mom said, maybe he had a crush on you back then. Years later, you meet again, sparks fly. I laughed. How many romance novels have you been reading? I'd already made a fool of myself once with Nathan. I wouldn't do it again. I opened the chat with my new contact. So we were middle school classmates. He typed, deleted, typed again, finally sending. You don't mind? Why would I mind? Let's hang out more then. I don't have many friends here. Over the next while, Dean would pop up unexpectedly, eventually just helping us with our work. He had a great personality, lively, kind, energetic. He could chat easily with 80-year-old grandmas. And my mom. She met him once and tried to drag him home for dinner. I whispered to him, you're different from when we first met. He didn't get it at first. When he realized I meant his transformation from suit guy to casual guy, he scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. First impressions seemed important then. Not anymore. He leaned in, eyes bright. Now second impressions are more important. I didn't like the suit wearing elite type. And I didn't want to date. When I noticed Dean's feelings, I told him this directly. That day, he drove straight to my house. Look out your window. Dean held a balloon, slowly letting it rise. I caught it and saw the words attached. Then be my first friend in this city. We each held one end of the balloon string. In the complete silence, the moonlight shone lonely on the men standing below. He must have been nervous. Like every second of my hesitation was a death sentence. I tied the balloon to my window. Texted him. Hi, new friend. Dean smiled. 8. Nathan's message came 2 months later. He texted from a new number. Every time I blocked him, he'd just use another number. Once I accidentally answered, he didn't even speak. My patience ran out. Nathan, can you stop bothering me? His voice was hoarse. Mom misses you. When will you come visit her? Mentioning Mrs. Blackwood always softened my heart. She'd been sending me money occasionally, probably worried I was unemployed. When I refused to accept it, she started sending me healthy recipes instead. It reminded me of when I first moved in. She was always finding new ways to cook for me. When I got sick, she stayed up all night taking care of me. I couldn't be cruel to her, which made it impossible to completely hate Nathan either. Seeing my softening attitude, he pressed on, or I could come pick you up. Aren't you back with Grace? I cut him off. The other end went silent. I laughed coldly. Is this how you treat all your girlfriends? Always looking for the next while holding on to the current one. Nathan, I took a deep breath. Don't you think you're pathetic? After that night, Nathan went quiet for a long time. I thought that was the end of it until I ran into Chris in this small city. Dean and I were just leaving the university district. A black Maybach stopped in front of us. When I saw that face, my smile vanished. So you got a new boyfriend? He sneered. Hey buddy, do you know what she used to look? Before he could finish, Dean's fist connected. I was shocked. Chris fought back. Someone called the police. Since it was mutual combat, they both signed an agreement and were released. Chris touched his bruised face and spat viciously. I walked up to him, grabbed his collar. What's wrong with you? He looked at me playfully, suddenly smiling. Yeah, I'm messed up. So what? He reached for my hand. I quickly let go. He brushed off his collar. Nathan and Grace broke up. He can't forget you. I figured a text wouldn't do it justice, so I came to tell you in person. Who even are you? He bent down with an exaggerated grin. Can't recognize a good deed. I stared at him expressionlessly. He finally got bored. I grabbed Dean's hand. He froze for a moment, then held on tighter. I just wanted to get out of there, not noticing Dean's red ears or Chris's darkening expression. Hey, Chris called after me, his gaze complex and deep. Just get back with Nathan. I promise I won't insult you anymore. You're sick. For the first time in months, I texted Nathan. Can't you control your dog? 9. Maybe I was too angry. That night, I had a rare dream about high school. My strong, muscular body, always drawing stares wherever I went. Sometimes teenage cruelty comes out of nowhere. They'd push each other around. Would you dare kiss her? Are you asking for a beating? Compare which is bigger, you or her. Once, coming back from the bathroom, a girl's shoelace was untied, and the class troublemaker was leering at her exposed neckline. I still remember that look. It made my skin crawl. As I walked past, I stepped hard on his foot. When he tried to hit me, Nathan caught his fist. Nathan pinned him against the wall, one hand gripping his face. he said coldly. Apologize. The sunlight that day seemed to carry the scent of fresh grass. My heart skipped a beat without warning. When I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears. It was only 2 a.m. I got up for water and heard something outside. Opening the door, I saw Nathan. He looked exhausted, leaning against his car, cigarette butt scattered at his feet. The cold wind had turned his face pale, he seemed thinner. Seeing me, his unfocused eyes gradually cleared. The next second, the door closed again. Back in bed, I got a new message. Sorry about Chris. We're done, he won't bother you again. He hesitated, then added, Grace and I broke up. 10. Nathan temporarily moved to my city. Every time I went out, he was waiting outside. When I came home at night, he was still there. I ignored him. My mom ignored him too. People should have self-respect, but you can't stop a dog from guarding a house, she said, adding, it's not even his house. During this time, our social media channel finally started gaining traction, getting some small advertising deals. Ming and I worked even harder. We squeezed 2 days worth of work into one, running around frantically, brainstorming content. But joy turned to pain when I wasn't watching where I was going and got scraped by a bicycle. Ming supported me. You okay? Dean had already run off like the wind. When he returned with bags of medicine, Ming teased him endlessly. Still out of breath, he looked at me with bright eyes. Can I? What? Help you with the medicine? I ended up not letting Dean help, finding a nearby chair to treat it myself. We ended filming early, and Dean insisted on driving me home. The car moved like a turtle, with him nervously looking left and right. I didn't call him out on it. A normally 30-minute drive took an hour and a half. After parking, he rushed to open my door, naturally taking my hand. Thanks. Turning around, I froze. Nathan was leaning against the wall, staring straight at us. His face was pale, his lips moving. He started walking toward us. Dean noticed my tension and looked down. Someone you don't like? Yeah. I tried to walk past like he wasn't there, but Nathan caught the edge of my shirt. I looked at him with dead eyes. He snapped out of it and let go. He looked down at my leg. Did you treat it? Met with silence. The door closed in his face again, like countless times before. No response. Inside, I heard cooking sounds from the kitchen. My mom's eyes lit up seeing Dean. Dean, stay for dinner. He looked at me uncertainly. I nodded. One more won't hurt. He broke into a dimpled smile. I asked him, aren't you curious who he was? I can guess, he said, changing his shoes, but it doesn't matter. He leaned close. If you say you hate him, then he's not important. By the time dinner finished, it was 9. The moon was high. Mom asked me to walk Dean down. Opening the door, Mom's smile disappeared. Standing there in the dark scaring people. Dean's eyes fell on Nathan and he smiled mysteriously. Goodbye, Mrs. Chen. Walking him to his car, I told him to be careful driving. Suddenly a hand caught mine. Dean pulled me into a gentle embrace. He whispered in my ear, can I have a friend's hug? You already took it without asking. Sorry. Dean was suddenly yanked away as Nathan grabbed his collar, fist raised. Like a wild animal. Nathan. He froze, his eyes red. I couldn't understand his expression. He was the one who wanted to end things, yet here he was acting like this. Dean smiled, both carefree and disdainful, asking me, want to call the police? Nathan persisted. Who is he? Is he your boyfriend? Nathan, we're broken up. I know. He became helpless, tears falling one by one as he stumbled over his words, but I regret it, Sarah. But I don't. I rejected him directly. I don't regret breaking up with you, and I don't regret leaving the city, so I won't ever look back. Whether I have a boyfriend, whether it's him or someone else, who I marry, none of that concerns you anymore. Because it won't be you. The sword finally fell, and all hope vanished from his eyes. That night, Nathan didn't wait downstairs anymore. Much later, one night, I got a text from Nathan. It had been 2 months since we last met. Can we meet one last time? Just to say goodbye properly. This time, I replied, okay. Outside, light snow was falling, coating everything in white. Without realizing it, the year was coming to an end. An ending, but also a beginning. 11. I met Nathan at a nearby cafe. Heavy snow covered the ground. Street cleaners had started early, only tire tracks remained on the road when I came out. The sidewalk snow hadn't been cleared yet, its surface turned to ice. I kicked at it, what looked solid quickly scattered. I couldn't help but laugh. My smile froze as I saw Nathan standing nearby, looking at me intently. For a moment, I was back in high school. Winter snow days when I loved making snowballs just to kick them apart. Nathan would open the window and call, Mom says come up for dinner. Coming. I'd smile back, then run inside. As I walked past him now, Nathan sighed softly. For a moment, I thought we were back then. His lips curved bitterly, but this time it's for goodbye. We sat at opposite ends. I ordered coffee and checked the time. I only have an hour. About the diary, I'm sorry. He sat down. I'm so sorry. That's not what I care about anymore. His hands fidgeted nervously. If not for the diary, could we? There are no ifs. I cut him off. Even without the diary, we're impossible now. I've always wondered. He looked confused. After all our years together, why won't you give me even one chance? Let me ask you. I suppressed my irritation. Why did you get together with me in the first place? He was silent. To repay a debt. I summarized this absurd situation. What gives you the right? I smiled slowly. What makes you think your affection was some kind of gift to me? Just because I liked you. Actually, soon after confessing to you, I'd already moved on. I saved you that day mainly because we knew each other. I would have saved anyone. If you hadn't given me hope afterward, I would have adjusted and started a new life quickly. I was good to you because I thought you deserved it. That's why I was good to you. I looked down, stirring my coffee, unable to hold back a laugh. Nathan, love can be beautiful, but it's not so huge that it ruins someone's life. Even without you, I would still have lived well. What bothers me is that you had so many chances to tell me you didn't love me, but you chose the worst way, tying us together. You wasted 7 years of your life. And you wasted mine too. Nathan stood up suddenly, his eyes panicked, wanting to explain, but not knowing where to start. He closed his eyes, tears at the corners. No, it was just me. You didn't realize your own feelings. Seeing him nod, I laughed harder. Since I was little, my mom told me never to let people you dislike anger you, just care about the people who matter. That's why I never complained about Chris to you. First, because I didn't care about his opinion, and second, because I didn't want to upset you. That's what love is. Love is very obvious and clear, at least to me. I loved you, so I wanted to be good to you. But your love, I asked in return. Nathan said nothing. If I hadn't found that diary and we'd gotten married, you still would have been unhappy. You would have felt morally trapped, and our marriage would have been miserable. You still don't seem to realize. Even after all this time, my heart wasn't completely unmoved. We didn't break up because of the diary or Chris. It was your attitude, thinking you were being tolerant when you were actually being arrogant. You looked down on me, but I wasn't completely blameless either. Under his nervous, anxious gaze, I said softly, my mistake was not cutting my losses sooner. When you let your friend treat me that way, I should have known it was time to end things. Today is the last time I'll see you, out of respect for your mother. I picked up my bag, and he quickly stood. Let's not meet again, Nathan. Without looking back, I left. Opening the door, my phone rang right on cue. Ming urged, are you done? We're waiting for you at dinner. Someone's about to come looking for you. I smiled. On my way. 12. In March, a little girl sought our help. In the changeable spring weather, she wore a thin school uniform with a red scarf. Her left eye looked strange, as if blind. On the street, she stopped us. Can I make friends here? I want to make friends. The girl's name was Amy. Her parents died in a car accident when she was young, and her grandmother raised her. Her grandmother often called her bad luck, ignored her, saw her left eye as a curse. Her classmates bullied her too. Nobody likes me. Her voice dropped. Because of her request, we searched several elementary schools. Finally, at First Elementary, we found a girl. She had a sweet smile, like a little sun. She bounced along the way when we brought her. Her parents watched with fond exasperation. She's always been a wild one. Then, worried we might judge, they added, but there's nothing wrong with that. And there wasn't. Whether lively or quiet, isn't it all just who they are? The two girls met, and within 15 minutes they were inseparable. The new girl looked down seriously. Your eye isn't ugly at all, they just can't see beauty. From today on, I'm your friend. I spoke up. Me too. Ming, me too. The girl's mom crouched down, patting her head. We live nearby. If you miss Mandy, just come over, I'll cook for you. Before leaving, I told Amy, don't worry too much about what people who don't like you say, it's not important enough. What's important is knowing who you really are. I once read in Sophia Tana's book, I choose to be my own intimate lover, my own loyal comrade. Self-respect, self-love, self-confidence, this is my life's path, unwavering until death. The girl looked confused, but I just smiled and hugged her. Amy, you are such a wonderful person. I didn't post this episode right away, telling Ming I still had a bonus scene to film. That night, while editing at home, I heard a car outside. Dean called, Sarah, come down. We hadn't seen each other for about a week. He'd started at a new company, flying abroad for business, barely touching ground. When I got downstairs, he was opening his trunk. He waved when he saw me. The trunk was full of snacks he'd collected from abroad. He put a few boxes in my arms, keeping most in his own, casually saying, "Just for a regular friend." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He lifted his chin. "Friend, lead the way." Our relationship never progressed further, and he didn't seem to mind. Once I couldn't help asking, "Did you like me back then?" I hadn't even figured myself out then. He shifted closer. "I really wanted to be your friend. When you transferred schools, I was heartbroken. Back then, Dean was skinny and insecure, always walking with his head down, while Sarah always held her head high, fighting back against undeserved cruelty. Teenage Dean thought, I really want to be friends with Sarah. But for those years, he never took that step. The day he learned she transferred, Dean hid at home and cried. Dean never told Sarah that at 23, they'd briefly crossed paths through work. She didn't recognize him, but he recognized her. Later, when he clashed with his company's management, he returned home. Learning Sarah was back, his first move was to approach her. He wanted so badly to be her friend. Getting to know the real Sarah, the fog lifted, and he saw someone even braver and more authentic. It wasn't love at first sight, more like love growing day by day. A seed planted in middle school, finally sprouting years later. Sarah was shocked. "I never knew anyone wanted to be my friend that badly back then." Dean propped his chin up, looking at her. "You shine. People on your wavelength will always be drawn to you." He was grateful for fate's twists bringing them back together. Sarah said to take it slow. He thought that was perfect, because he didn't like rushed romance either. Epilogue. After their coffee shop goodbye, Nathan never messaged Sarah again. Years of feelings ending like this, just thinking about it made his heart ache. But he had caused it all himself. After Chris's scene with her, Nathan had a huge fight with him. He couldn't understand why Chris was so cruel to her, holding on like a dog with a bone. Until Chris kept repeating, "Then why don't you go get her back? What's so great about that small city that she has to stay there?" Finally, in those twisted words, Nathan sensed something different. He narrowed his eyes. "You like her?" Chris froze, reflexively sneering, "Like I'd ever liked that FA. You like her?" This time it wasn't a question. Chris dropped the act. "Fine. So what if I do? Why does she look at me like I'm garbage? If she'd shown me even a bit of kindness, I wouldn't have bullied her." Hearing this, Nathan felt disbelief but mostly regret. He'd let this venomous snake tear at Sarah for years. "But you disgusted her. Didn't she disgust you too?" Chris shot back. "I'm different from you." His eyes turned cold as he stepped closer. "We had something real. To Sarah, it's all the same." He ignored those words. Went to Sarah's hometown, obsessively waiting outside her building. He wanted to tell Sarah he did love her. He'd broken up with Grace. He didn't love her at all. Could they start over? But Sarah didn't give him the chance. Proving Chris right, Sarah was just as disgusted with him. After Sarah left, he sat in the coffee shop for a long time. When he finally left, he felt lost for a moment, not knowing where to go. He and Sarah had no home anymore. No direction led to their home together. He forced himself to stop following her news, threw himself into work until he ended up in the hospital. In his hospital bed, he opened Sarah's account. She had a new video. One had a bonus clip. It was Sarah saying, "Dear girls, hello, what are you doing right now? Buried in studies, or rushing through a busy city? Are you a student, an adult, or a mother? Are you doing well? Are you happy? Whatever your role, I want to tell you today you're amazing. I used to be a weightlifter with a strong body and looks that others didn't find attractive. I heard people talk about me, put me down, but that didn't define me. As a teenager, I always tried to keep my back straight. I thought, what do they know? I could train daily, gain weight for my sport, of course, I should be proud of myself. Similarly, I hope you watching this are proud of yourself. After college, I worked at a big company in marketing for years. When I quit, I struggled with the decision but chose to leave. I returned home, decided to take a break. I was lucky. That's when I realized life has much more room for error than we think. When you find you're on the wrong path, just turn back. Making a new choice is better than staying on the wrong path. Of course, not turning back is fine too. The next turn might lead to something beautiful. Dear girls, I hope you're proud of yourselves. I hope you love yourselves. Just like I do. I'm satisfied with who I am. Nathan watched it over and over, torturing himself. The pain in his heart grew clearer as he remembered her cold gaze that day. You look down on me. She was never weak, he was the weak one, using feelings to avoid problems. That day, he had a dream of a snowy day, of a girl falling into his arms after making snowballs. Sarah, he whispered. The girl looked up, her eyes bright and warm. Goodbye. In his dream, he said farewell one last time. In the dream was life's most beautiful season. Outside the dream, years had changed everything. He realized, many years ago, he should have said a proper goodbye. He understood too late, and wasted so many years of a girl's life.